A tanker, 460 feet of steel hull, is running at 14 knots straight toward the blockade line. It has not responded to Channel 16. It is not slowed. It has not changed course. In the cockpit of the aircraft overhead, a pilot has 4 options. He has already used 2. What happens in the next 6 minutes is not a question of firepower. It is a question of physics and doctrine, and the answer depends entirely on which aircraft the United States sent to hold this line and why that aircraft, of everything in the inventory, was the only one that could. To understand what the pilot does next, you first have to understand what Hormuz is actually asking the aircraft to do. The United States Navy is now enforcing a blockade of every Iranian port on the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The world noticed. Oil markets noticed. Tehran noticed. FA-18s flew combat air patrol. P-8 Poseidons watched from altitude. Surface ships held the legal authority over every enforcement decision. This is a joint operation, and it always was. But within that joint architecture, one mission required an aircraft that could fly low enough to see a small boat in heavy sea clutter, stay long enough to be a credible presence, and respond to a vessel that refused to stop without immediately destroying it. That specific mission went to one aircraft. It was a 30,000-pound aircraft with a 30mm rotary cannon designed in 1972 to kill Soviet tanks on the plains of Germany, an aircraft the Air Force has been trying to retire for a decade. But to understand why that aircraft and not the others, we need to start with the problem Hormuz actually creates. Not hunting, not identifying, enforcing. And those are not the same equation. Every air power mission over this conflict until now has been a hunting mission. Something is flying toward the formation or hiding among civilian boats. The task is to find it and engage it. The mission ends with something being neutralized. Blockade enforcement is the inverse. The goal is not destruction. The goal is prevention. A vessel that never enters the prohibited zone is a success. A vessel that turns around when it sees an aircraft is a success. The ideal outcome of a blockade patrol is nothing happens at all. This changes everything about what the enforcing aircraft must be able to do. A hunter needs to find and neutralize. An enforcer needs to be seen, be credible, and be persistent. Presence is the weapon. Physics determines whether the presence is real, but presence only works if the aircraft can actually get there and stay. Here is the geometry that makes that harder than it sounds. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. Through those 21 miles, international shipping moves in a traffic separation scheme, 2 directional lanes, each approximately 2 nautical miles wide, with a safety separation zone between them. 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits that corridor. To enforce a blockade on that corridor, an aircraft cannot pass through it. It has to cover it continuously, visibly, credibly. At 300 knots, an A-10C crosses the full width of the strait in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. That sounds fast enough, but a patrol is not a transit. A patrol means staying long enough to see what is moving, where it is going, and whether it should be there. That requires something most aircraft trade away in favor of speed: loiter time. An A-10C with external fuel tanks maintains 2.5 hours on station, 2.5 hours of armed, visible presence over the same stretch of open water. That is the energy state that matters here. Not speed, not altitude, not sensor range, time. Run the same calculation with different aircraft. The FA-18 Super Hornet, capable, proven, carrier-based, provides roughly 1.3 hours of usable loiter over the strait at over $25,000 per flight hour. The math strains. The Hornet was built to destroy high-value targets with precision weapons, not to orbit a shipping lane for 90 minutes, execute 5 stages of escalating warnings on a vessel that refuses to stop, and do it cheaply enough to sustain the operation around the clock. Think of it this way. A patrol officer on a highway does not need to pursue every vehicle. He needs to be visible. His presence changes behavior before a single interaction occurs. An A-10C orbiting the Hormuz approach lanes at 300 knots is exactly that: visible, armed, and patient. The question physics then asks is, can it actually see what it needs to see? At altitude, a pilot can theoretically see far. The math works out to dozens of miles in any direction. But seeing far and seeing clearly are 2 completely different things. Over the Persian Gulf, the problem is the water itself. When wind is up and waves are running, the surface bounces radar signals in every direction. It creates background noise, a moving, shifting wall of interference that small boats hide inside. From altitude, a fast attack craft does not show up as a clear signal. It shows up as a flicker inside that noise. The Iranian Pi-Cap craft makes this worse on purpose. Built from fiberglass composite, it does not reflect radar well. Radar is not the answer here, but the A-10C carries the Lightning Targeting Pod, an infrared sensor that ignores radar entirely and reads engine heat against the cool surface of the ocean. A running engine on a small boat glows hot against cold seawater. That sensor can find it. The catch is range and altitude. To see clearly, you fly low, but descending has a cost. Iran's shoulder-fired missiles, the Strela and the domestically built Misog-2, are designed for exactly this. Both lock on to heat, both are man-portable, both are effective below 11,000 feet. To see what you need to stop, you fly into their range. To survive doing both, you need a 1,200-pound titanium shell around the cockpit rated to take a hit and keep flying. That is exactly what the A-10C was built with, and exactly why it's the only aircraft in the inventory that can descend into this problem without accepting a one-way trip. The trade-off is as simple as aviation gets. To see what matters, the A-10C gives up altitude, and altitude over open water is the only thing physics gives you for free. Now, the tanker has run out of time, and the pilot has run out of options that do not involve weapons. The first two options are already gone. The third message is physical. An APKWS laser-guided rocket lands in the water 50 feet ahead of the tanker's bow. The captain sees the splash. He now knows precisely what is overhead, what it carries, and what the fourth option looks like. If the tanker keeps closing, the GAU-18 targets the bridge structure, the exhaust stacks, the deck equipment. But the tanker is only half the problem. As the A-10 descends below 3,000 feet inside the MANPADS envelope, 3 Pi-Cap fast attack craft appear running at 50-plus knots out of coastal clutter. Built to be invisible on radar carrying shoulder-fired missiles, they pose a simultaneous threat. The A-10C does not need to be fast or stealthy. It needs to be there, visible, armed, and credible. With a full patrol cycle of fuel and a titanium shell, it handles both threats. Why does this aircraft hold the line? It comes down to 5 constraints: a 21-mile width demanding continuous presence, a composite hull threat defeating high-altitude sensors, civilian shipping density requiring escalation steps, a residual MANPADS threat demanding armor, and a budget logic that cannot sustain $40,000 per hour platforms. The A-10 is the only one that satisfies all 5 simultaneously. The F-35 cannot loiter or descend without sacrificing stealth. The FA-18 costs too much. The P-8 is not armed for the escalation ladder. The MQ-9 Reaper lacks the armor to survive. The A-10 did not choose this mission. Physics wrote the job description: loiter, descend, survive, escalate. Blockade enforcement is a psychological operation that physics makes credible. A patrol the vessel crew cannot see is not a blockade. A patrol that cannot respond across the escalation ladder is a list of warnings without consequences. In 2026, the A-10 is holding a line on the water. The physics says it works. The retirement clock says it ends. When the last Warthog lands, who writes the next job description, and does the aircraft exist yet?